Hey, Mom, when's the next time you're gonna come by? You gotta make sure this chin stays double. Quit making you so fat. Yo, Mom will make you fatter, motherfucker, won't she?
Challenge provisions do not violate the petitioner's First Amendment rights, end quote. Friday's unanimous decision comes just 2 days before the deadline for social media platform's parent company ByteDance to either sell the app or have it banned. President Biden signed the bipartisan bill back in April, but in a statement Friday, the White House said, quote, given the sheer fact of timing, this administration recognizes that actions to implement the law simply must fall to the next administration, which takes office on Monday. President-elect Trump had previously asked the Supreme Court to pause the implementation of the law until he could take office and look into a political resolution to keep the app available to American users. CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson joins me now. So Jessica, are you at all surprised that this was a unanimous decision?
I'm not, but only because I had the benefit of listening to the oral arguments in this case and reading the lower court decision. There was a DC Circuit Court decision that said something very similar to what the Supreme Court said today. And I think for people watching at home, it really boils down to two words: national and security. That Congress looked at classified sensitive information, and there was bipartisan support for this particular piece of legislation, and concluded that there was a national security threat by virtue of ByteDance owning TikTok. And what the court today said is they're really worried about data privacy. The government had actually come forward with two different rationales. One is kind of propaganda and misinformation. The other is data privacy. The unanimous Supreme Court said, yes, we're worried about data privacy. We're worried about it to the tune of it actually infringing on and making us less safe, a national security issue. And they did not think that the First Amendment prohibited this piece of legislation from going into effect.
I mean, there are so many questions about what happened Sunday and beyond.
First thing you can do to improve your day.
See an error message when they try and open TikTok, will they just not be able to download it again? Will it eventually become obsolete if they can't run updates? And then you have President Biden and his administration saying that they won't enforce this law. So does that mean TikTok will still be available Sunday?
So there are a lot of questions, as you said, with respect to, what's going to happen on Sunday when it's still President Biden's administration. I think on Google that host TikTok. And with respect to what is going to happen to people, if TikTok wants to continue to offer this as a media platform, my understanding is that it could just die a slow death. People will not be able to newly upload it and won't be able to update it. So it will just kind of wither away. We've also seen some reports that TikTok might just shut down. So that, I think, is not so much a legal question, although certainly, as you alluded to, lots of legal questions with respect to what will happen next. Will the next administration say to the Attorney General, we don't want to enforce this piece of legislation? Will the next administration try and overturn this legislation? This is not a constitutional amendment. It's a law. We can overturn it if we want to.
So what legal options does Trump have if he doesn't want this to go through?
So Trump could, one, direct his Attorney General to say, we're not going to be enforcing this law. Yes, the Supreme Court just said that it is possible to have this law, meaning it doesn't infringe on our First Amendment rights, but they didn't say you must have it. You must.
Wouldn't that sort of put him at odds with the legislative branch? I mean, this was a bipartisan bill, and many lawmakers still stand by it.
Yes, and one could absolutely say, if you did not want this to be the law of the land, then go ahead and use your political capital and talk to Congress and say, here's why I think it should no longer be in effect. Now, attorney generals do have something called prosecutorial discretion, and they could say to these app stores, don't worry, we won't come after you, but that really is a trust exercise. And as you said, broad, or as we've talked about, broad bipartisan support in Congress There are some levers for the president to pull, both with respect to, again, talking to his attorney general or trying to convince Congress. Also, he can try and make a deal happen. I mean, he says, I'm the deal maker. He can talk to ByteDance and say, I found a buyer for you.
Jessica Levinson, like almost all of our conversations, we leave it with a to be continued. Thank you. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland. Scott, this TikTok ban, as I mentioned, was bipartisan. How are lawmakers reacting to not only what SCOTUS did, but what the president and president-elect were saying?
Oh, this is a big ink blot test, like a psychologist would give. You see in the ink what you want to see. Those who were championing this TikTok law back in April 2024, they are celebrating the Supreme Court's decision. They think this is validation of what they did. They have believed from the start that TikTok is a national security threat and a danger to people's privacy. You have people all across the spectrum politically on that. There are Democrats and Republicans. The most conservative Republicans and ardent Trump allies like Josh Hawley of Missouri said, great decision by the court. The more moderate Republicans, the pragmatists in those purple districts like Don Bacon of Omaha, Nebraska, said, great decision. But this all gets jumbled, doesn't it, in several different ways, including politically, because Donald Trump's going to have to make some move on this one way or the other beginning Monday. And those closely aligned Trump surrogates in the Congress who have said this is a good law, TikTok needs to be gone, may have to get behind whatever Trump chooses to do next. That's the politics that will begin to play out next week.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I posed to Jessica. Wouldn't that put him at odds with the legislative branch? I mean, does he have enough capital right now among Senate and House Republicans that if he wanted to reverse or block the law, that would be something they would help him on?
It's a great question. I never like to answer the same thing Jessica does, because Jessica is brilliant and I'm not.
I beg to differ.
Here's what I could say about the uniqueness of this situation, Lindsay. The political alliances here are all over the map. There's not a blue and red thing on TikTok. This was passed overwhelmingly last year at a moment when the two parties couldn't agree on whether the sky was blue. So it's difficult to get a measure as to how the parties are going to align once Trump decides what to do next. But this is more than political, isn't it? I mean, this was a law passed by Congress, signed by a president. A successive president can't understandably just overrule it with a stroke of a pen. There's going to likely have to be some legislative movement to withdraw this law or to help a president counteract it. And again, the politics here are weird, even in a Republican-dominated Washington.
Look, Scott, for better or for worse, there are some people who say come Sunday, whatever happens, they don't want to be without TikTok. They don't know what they're going to do. We know it's a lot of younger Americans. So I guess if in fact this ban does go through, which we still don't really fully know the extent of which that will happen, are members of either political party worried about alienating their constituents?
I think they are. I think they also see the upside of saving this thing with the newest generation of voters. I can speak from personal experience. I spoke at a high school this morning, talked about the TikTok ban, and the students wouldn't let me change topics and talk about anything else. There is a visceral connection that the newest voters, those 18 to 21, have with this app. And yeah, there's going to be political upside potentially for those who salvage it. But we're also talking about the beginning of an odd-numbered year when voters couldn't be less connected.
Be a fly on the wall in that session with you, the brilliant Scott McFarland on a Friday. Thank you.
Thanks.
Firefighters are making progress toward containing those wildfires in California, and the winds are dying down for now. We're on the ground with a look at where efforts stand. Plus, it's going to be a cold weekend for millions as a polar vortex is in for a big part of the country. How long the chilly air will stick around? You're streaming the Daily Report.
Where's my nigga Will? Get dirty. Get dirty. Get dirty. Get dirty. Got to get dirty.
years now. If you have any life experiences, you can share them. Finding the exact date that the ancestral family business was founded is essential. Sharing with my grandmother, I get that moment every day.
Sasha loves it. The founder of Ilya. If your barrier is broken down, your skin is defenseless. My skin is so sensitive. Doctor C and Dr. B able to replenish with a barrier. My skin is protected, less irritated, more hydrated, smooth, soothed. Skin is meant to endure. Skin is meant to live. Barrier is made to protect.
Tap into Etsy for original and affordable home accessories like lighting under $150 to random finds. For over $100, get your best of photo vintage shackets. Or pick up custom shelving for over $40 to make space without emptying your pockets. Get cozy with little robes for $75 or less. Affordable home install plans to help you welcome whatever's next. Etsy has it.
Winter season hits, emergencies are your immune system is so much more than just a be ready to fight back with emergency. And for on-the-go immune support, try emergency crystals. No water needed.
Hey, Susan? Honey?
Yeah?
I respect that, but that cough looks pretty bad. Try this Robitussin, honey.
The real honey you love, plus the powerful cough relief you need.
Mind if I root through your trash?
Robitussin with real honey and elderberry.
It crossed my mind every time I come on off and go to the store.
Subsiding winds in the Los Angeles area have allowed fire crews to gain more control of the ongoing wildfires. As of Friday evening, the Palisades fire is 31% contained. The Eden fire is 65% contained. And further west in Ventura County, the Auto fire